Hi, I'm Jillybean Fitzhenry, and I am going to show you part 2 of Be Grateful Gnome. This time we're going to focus on the gnome itself, his hat, his shoes, and the pumpkins. So to begin with, I am going to actually start with the beard. And I'm using the Dynasty Black Silver rake brush or toothbrush, and just going to use water this time. So I'm going to start with a little bit of kind of undercoating. I'm using the Traditions medium white and just thinning it with about 50% water. You could also use the Americana bleach sand, just so it's an off-white, dirty white, okay? I want to just kind of establish the flow of the beard to begin with. Feel free to turn your piece to get different directions. And when I do come down the different pieces of hair or sections, I'm not trying to flip that corner. I'll come down and then reverse and pull back in the curl area. Sometimes I need to just kind of get up on the corner or turn the brush a little sideways. He's got a little bit of a scruffy beard, so don't be afraid to take it a little bit slow and just kind of work getting the different sections in there. Keep it a little bit transparent. I do want to see some of the black background showing through. So just get that all filled in. Now, another thing that you can do, this is a 1/4 inch rake brush, but if you feel like you need just a little bit smaller one, you certainly could take this and you could trim it off. I take a little scissors and I can turn it into a 1/8 by just nipping it off right at the ferrule, a little bit on each side, and then I would have a little bit a smaller brush. So sometimes it's kind of nice to just get a couple of the 1/4 inch so that you'll have one to make a little bit smaller. It's also nice for ornaments having the smaller size. And I'll talk more about the boots after, but you'll see that I had the boots kind of based in already. And I'm not real worried too much about the hair at this stage because just about everything gets covered up. I do like to see a little bit of that pretty Laguna background showing through. Kind of flip the tips, get nice fluffy little tips on your brush. Don't put any pressure down. Just a very light touch. And sometimes I have to remind myself to slow it down a little bit because I can get a little bit nicer brush mark if I go just a little bit slower. Just continue all the way around. And I will come back and get the mustache afterwards. Now here I'm going to start backwards and get the flips, and then I'll finish connecting them. It doesn't need to be totally individual lines at this stage. You just want to establish the direction that the hair is growing and get all the areas kind of based in, but definitely transparent. Now, if you ever made a great big mistake, you can always come back with your background color and even put a few little brush marks with the rake brush in with that too. Okay, then I also want to do the mustache. I'm going to come down all the way, getting that filled in, but not solid. And I can pull from the bottom up or the top down, whatever is more comfortable And just lightly kind of catch all those strokes. Okay, now that's step one. Okay, then I want to do a little bit of shading, and I'm just going to mix a gray color. I'm going to go back to my Jillybean Dirty Dancer, and just as a reminder, what it is, it's a round, pointed round on one end and a blender on the other side. For this stage, I'm just going to use water, and I'm going to take just a little bit of black and a little bit of white, just make kind of a dark gray, and there again, I'm going to thin it down with some water so it's a little more transparent. Sometimes when you mix it like this, you get too much on your brush, so maybe stop and blot it off a little bit and then reload the brush. I want to get just some washes of color in. Now these are not going to be individual hairs. I want it darker up under the hat and to separate the mustache. And then I'll flip the brush over and I'll just drag that color down in so that it doesn't have a real definite stopping point. Let's see, I might, because it's wet, I might have to tip this up just a little bit so you can see the color better. I want to separate the mustache from the beard also. So I'm just kind of color booking in with the pointed round, dragging that down, and then just kind of brush it with that dry brush. Just kind of get rid of any real super harsh lines. Okay, I'll do the other side. Go under the hat, next to the nose, next to the mustache, kind of drag that out. And you see, I'm not trying to make individual little lines, and then I'm just going to kind of rub away that ending stroke. Okay, so once I've kind of gotten the mustache and the beard separated, just kind of scrub that around. I also want to add some in the rest of the beard as well. So I'll just kind of come along maybe a section or two that has, you know, a little bit of a wave area going there, and just kind of scrub just so that it's just starts to blend in. All of your next steps are going to totally pull this together. This is really kind of a messy stage. Just got to kind of bear with it a little bit. Just trust it'll be fine. And just want to get some different shades going in between some of these waves. Flip the brush and just kind of blend that in a little bit, but I'm not trying to get a real perfect blend by any means. I just want to get some different gray color coming in and just rub that in a little bit. All right. Now for the top of the mustache, I want to get a little bit up there as well. I don't want that to come down as far. So just kind of roughly get some gray in there and just kind of rub where you ended off with that gray in the mustache. And then go ahead and rinse your brush. Okay, then I want to get a little bit brighter white going. I am going to switch, and I'm going to use the rake brush that I cut a little bit smaller. Still just using water, and I'm going to use titanium white. It's my brightest white. Thin that with some water. Now, maybe not quite 50% this time, because I want to see a little bit more pigment in it. I'm actually this time going to start with my mustache, because this I want to be the brightest. And I want to get nice little feathery tips on the bottom of that mustache. I want that to stand out from the beard. and just some light lines. Try not to fill it in solid. It's nice if you can still see some of that Laguna showing through, as well as some of the gray. It's going to be a little bit brighter white at the tips, and I can come back and add some more white in there after, so don't try to do it all in one step necessarily. Okay, get some more on, and I'm actually going to turn it upside down. It's easier to pull towards yourself, so if I start at the tips and pull up, a little bit easier. I don't want to start right under the nose with this because that's where my shadow is. And if I set my brush down, I'm going to have a lot of color coming off, and I don't want to lose that gray. I can certainly always go back and add more gray. Okay, now the same with the tips at the bottom of the beard. I'm using the brighter white, titanium white. And this is the Traditions that I've got. And the reason I'm using it is it actually just has a lot more pigment in it, so the colors are just a little bit more vibrant, but certainly could use the Americana also. Okay, and just follow the direction, really lighten up where you come closer to the mustache, so that you're not covering up all that nice gray that separates. Nice light touch, no pressure. Reload often. And you see, I'm not necessarily trying to follow all the way from the bottom all the way up. I'm doing it in smaller little strokes, but I'm trying to follow through the stroke with the same direction. Just really get lots of little white lines going in here. And I tell you, these rake brushes, they're so nice. This is a little bit stiffer rake brush, and so it allows me to get these nice little hairs without much effort at all. And these rakes come in 3 different sizes, and then I do cut the one a little smaller as well. Okay, let's get the other side. I just keep getting a little bit more water, a little bit more paint, mix that up nice and soupy. If I get too much water, it's going to be real transparent, so you just have to kind of play with it and adjust it as you go. If I were to drop my brush and get a great big blob, I can always come back with a little bit of the gray or the background color and pull some lines with those to help break up any area that I feel was a little too solid. But I'm going to want a few areas more solid than others eventually. Right now I'm just concentrating on getting the strokes in, and then I'll think about making some a little bit brighter white. Just getting the direction again. No pressure. Light touch. And it's okay if his beard is scruffy. Now I'm going to flip it back around again just so I can reach a little easier. Just a light touch, little fluffy tips. Try not to lose all your nice dark gray under the hat. Everyone's beard comes out just a little bit different. It's kind of like your signature. No two are the same, and every time I do it, it's just a little bit different, and that's okay. All right, so I think I'll kind of leave it at that. Okay, now I want to continue with the white, but this time I want to bump up a few of the areas, get them a little bit brighter white. So I'm not going to go all the way through all the waves this time. This time I want to concentrate more on center areas. So let's take, here I've got a wave that I can see right here. I want to add more white right in the middle of that. Pull a few down and a few up, but it can be a little bit more solid in the center, and that's going to help pop that forward. Okay, now instead of going right across from it, I'm going to come down. I want each wave to have a little bit different area that has a highlight in it, so it does give the beard a little bit more interest that way. Doesn't make it look quite so much of a carbon copy. So just pick some center areas, but let it go ahead and just kind of vary within each section. And I'll still probably come back and add just a few little lines with a liner or a script brush. Can always get more detail. Okay, I want to get some up here maybe. Don't get too carried away. If you fill it in with too much white, you're going to lose the dimension of the beard. So just kind of skip around a little bit. Just adding some in some center areas. And it's okay for his beard to look a little bit more grayish. Mix a little bit more of the paint and the water. I'm going to get the mustache too. Now I want a little bit more on this edge, and then I'll kind of come into the center here. And I'll define those tips a little better with a liner brush. But I want this mustache to pop out away from the beard, so get the edges just a little bit brighter. But a little more in the center as well. Finish getting the waves off to the other side, just kind of hitting in the center areas. And trying not to lose all of my gray up by the nose. Okay, now I'm going to leave that alone. Rinse my brush. Now the one last thing on here would be to just add some defining little liner or script brush lines with the titanium white. You're going to get a little bit different look because you get a little bit different width of a line, so I can add my little details, especially, you know, the little tips of the mustache, you know, and if I need to add some flyaway hairs here and there, I can do that too. But this will help really pop the tips a little bit better for you. You can use it to kind of break up areas if you need to. You know, don't be afraid to pull a few little strokes here and there to break up even some center areas if needed. But see how that liner brush now, that's what's really going to pull it together and give it more character. So there again, it was thinned about half and half paint, half water, still using the titanium white. And you can use either a 20-aught or a 10-aught in the black gold in the script. I like that little bit longer liner, so that's why I like the script. I can get a little more paint coming off and less, I don't have to load it quite as often as a short liner. Let's turn this around, get some more tips. Add those little curls. I'm not trying to pull it all the way through, just really trying to accent those curls. But if I need a few that come all the way through, I sure can. If it's looking too solid and I need a little bit of difference in some of those waves, just pull a few little lines coming through. That'll really make a difference. And the same with on the mustache. And now I'm doing this just one step right after another, but I actually have like a fan going on in my studio here, so it's drying a little bit quicker. If you happen to be in a very humid area, it wouldn't even hurt to take a little hair dryer and dry in between each of these steps that I did. Sometimes if you try to work too much with each layer being too wet, it just kind of melts together and then you lose the difference in your brush strokes. So, but mine's actually drying pretty quickly here today, so I'm not too worried about it. Okay, let's turn it back around again. So now when you look at the one side of the beard compared to the other, you can see what a difference just those little strokes are making. It's making it look fluffier and giving it just a little bit more dimension. Get a few more in the mustache here too. It's okay for it to be a little on the wild side. Okay, let's get some more in each of these. Really get some last little details. And these lines are just slightly thicker than the ones that I made with the rake brush, but that's what makes them stand out. Very light touch, don't push down. If you push down, you're going to get a great big fat blob. Just a very light touch. And I know I'm going kind of quick here, but you may want to try and slow it down just a little bit. Take your time, but follow through with your lines in the same direction as the brush strokes that you put on with the rake brush. You wouldn't want to have them going a different direction. It's just where the hair is picking up some light and popping it forward. If you decided any of the middle sections needed to be a little bit brighter, you could certainly go back and add a few little liner brush lines right in those center areas one more time. Even though you did it with the rake brush, it'll pop it one more time, a little bit more forward. And especially these ones right in the center, in the bottom of the beard, but follow through with the same curve as you did for basing it in. Okay. Now, I think I'm going to leave that as is. I can always make a decision afterwards if I want to add any more little details to this. It's hard to tell until you get the whole rest of the design done. I do want it to be darker on each side of the nose, so I'm going to just go back to my pointed round end of my Dirty Dancer and really water down some black. Very transparent, because I want that to be a wash. And I'm going to carefully tuck that in on each side of the nose. Flip the brush over and just catch where I left off. I could have done this with extender also. I'm going to wet my blender brush because I've got a little spot that was drying a little too quick, so I'm just quick kind of dab that with a little bit of water, and that'll blend it. Get that very dark, but I could have used extender instead of the water if I wanted to for this, but it's such a small area, I think it'll be just fine. Okay, just pull some little strokes out and just kind of dab where I left off. Get that to just blend in, and I'll leave it alone. Sometimes I feel I need a little bit more under or between, you know, the mustache. That's another option, but I don't want to get too carried away with that right now. Okay, while I'm in this area, the nose, originally I basted in first with the medium white, and the medium white is this dirty white color here. Okay, and then I put warm beige, which is an Americana color. It's a flesh type of color, and put that on there. So now I want to do, in fact, let me grab just a little bit of that color because I want to make a darker shadow color for the nose. And for the darker shadow color, I'm going to just mix the warm beige and the burnt sienna together about half and half. Okay. This time I'm going to go back and get a little drop of extender and put in there. And I'm going to dip my blender brush in the extender, but really wipe that off on my paper towel. Okay. I'm going to blot on the towel just because I feel like my brush was pretty wet. Okay, now I want to go like a C shape. I'm going to go up under the hat and bottom of the nose here, a little bit fatter on that one side. Okay, pull it out skinny, flip my brush over and just catch where I left off with that color and soften it. Okay, so I've got a shadow. Now I'll probably come back and deepen that one more time with burnt sienna, but I'll let that dry a little bit. Now, if I needed to do it again, if I feel like I got it too transparent, I can go back right away. You don't have to wait. Go back right away, put some more paint on, get that filled in, and just soften just that edge that you want to blend. I don't want to go all the way into all the color. Just light, light, light touch. Barely catching it. I do want to let that dry before I do all the rest of that area. So let's continue on. I'm going to work on the gnome's hat next. Okay, so to start with, I undercoated the hat, the whole thing, with the medium white, and then base coated on top of it again with Hansa Yellow Medium for the top, or any really bright yellow, and I used Indian Yellow for the brim. Okay, now I'm going to use my Jillybean Dirty Dancer again, but this time I'm switching to the large one because I'm working in a little bit bigger areas. To start with, I'm going to go ahead and do some shadow areas. Let's start with the very top of the piece here. Depending on your area, if it's dry in your environment, will determine whether or not I want to go ahead and fill the whole thing in with extender or just use it in my brush itself. I'm going to show you how to do it if you do want to moisten it. So if I want to moisten the area first, I'm going to, and it's a big area, I'm going to maybe use a 1/2-inch angle brush. This is the black gold, but black gold, full squirrel, any of those work really nice. So I'm going to load the brush with extender, but really wipe off the excess on the cup. And this is the extender blending medium that I'm using in the Traditions. And I'm going to go ahead and moisten that entire hat. I do not want it too wet. I really want to work that into the surface itself. I just want to be able to see a shine when I tip this. If it's a small area, I might even just use the blender brush on my Dirty Dancer to just kind of rub some of it in, but really work that in. Now, if you're not sure if you've got too much or not, as a little safety precaution, you could take a paper towel and just gently blot it, just to be sure. You don't want it too wet. Okay, so because I'm using the extender blending method, I am going to dip both ends of my brush in extender, but really wipe it off on the towel. So for the blender brush, I go in a circle, and that's how I clean it in between colors also. For the round, I'm going to be a little bit more careful, the pointed round. Be a little more careful with that. But I want to wipe all the excess off. I just want to make sure I have no water in there. Then I'm going to do Yellow Deep. So this is kind of a little bit brighter color than what a raw sienna is, but you could certainly mix something close. Okay, and I want to create a little flipped area where the tail is going over my hat. And what I like about this is I can pull a nice solid color down the edge of where I want my shadow, flip my brush over, and just carefully catch that inside edge to soften it and blend it. Don't put any pressure down, just barely catch. And don't go all the way to the outside edge of the hat. You want to leave that color nice and bold out there. Rub the excess paint off, and I'm going to tip this a little bit just because I'm getting a shine on the camera, and I want you to see that it's just, this is a nice transparent color. Light, light, light touch. Now, if you get too much extender, it's going to be soupy. If that happens, stop, wipe it off, and just try it again. It'll come off very nicely. Okay, so there. If I go outside of the edges, I can just take a wet brush and wipe it off from out there. Okay, so I want to do this on both sides of the hat, but I also want to get a little area that dips in on the tail up here. There again, I can lay it in nice and solid. I'm going to taper it on both sides. Flip the brush, just barely catch that inside edge. Wipe the excess off in between on your paper towel. Just barely catch that. Okay, then same thing coming down the other side of the hat. I want it to taper, so I want it skinny, and then I want it to get a little bit fatter. Lay that in, nice and solid. Okay. And then it is easier to point your brush towards the area that you're going to be softening. So it's easier to turn it upside down to do that other side. Just barely catch that edge and soften it. Wipe any excess off on your towel. No pressure, just bare. It's almost like I'm tickling it up in the air. Very, very, very light touch. Okay. Then I also want to get some areas that are highlighted. I'm going to wait and do the brim after because I know I'm going to get my hand in it. Okay, now I washed my brush in water because I'm going to switch colors, but I always need to redress it again with the extender, but wipe the excess off. Okay, so now on that upper area I want to put some white highlights. So I've got the titanium white. And I want to get, well, let's go ahead and just dive right into the front center here. I want this center area here to kind of come up to like a point, but I need that nice soft blend in the middle, and then I'm just going to catch those outer edges. Make sure I don't have yellow on there. Catch those outer edges and soften where I stopped. I want to be able to see it go from white to yellow to the yellow deep. And soften on both sides. Now, I can do it this way, but I have a tendency to then pick up too much of the color and I don't get it blended right. So do yourself a favor, always point your blender brush towards the area that you want to soften. Try not to drag it out too much. You just want to soften that edge. And don't go into the very middle, because then you'll lose all your pretty color in there. You want to keep that nice bold color. Okay, then I want to get some up in the top center here also. Filling that in solid. Flip the brush around, soften that. Wipe off excess on my towel. Just really soften the outer edges. Try not to go in the middle. If my brush feels like it's getting dry, I pick up just a dab of extender on it to loosen the paint up again on the brush. I don't want to go into the water at this stage. Okay, I'm going to get the bottom edge of the tail of the hat right here. Flip the brush over, use the blender to soften. Wipe off excess on my towel. Just carefully catch that edge. Now, those of you that like to float color, a corner load or a side load, you certainly could do this with that as well. You could certainly do that type of a method. Okay, then I want to just kind of get in the middle of that tail there, and there again, just catch the edges and soften. I just feel when you're trying to highlight in the center of an area, it's really hard doing it with a corner load or a float of color, where this way you can lay it in nice and solid and just soften the edges. Okay, so I'm going to leave that alone. Sometimes as my hat dries, I decide I maybe needed more color. I think I've got plenty on my shadows here, but I can always go back and do any of it a second time. Okay, now I washed my brush, so I've got a re-put extender in it. Wipe it on the towel. I want to make sure that I don't have white in my blender, so I dipped it in extender and really going to rub it and clean it on my paper towel, because now I'm going to go into the orange and I'm going to put some shadow on the brim. So I've got Pear Non Orange, and I'm going to load the brush with that. There again, this is a nice pretty transparent color, nice and bright, and I want to get nice solid on the outer edge of the brim here. maybe taper it up a little bit. And then wherever I want to stop, let me tip this just a little, there you go. Wherever I stop, then I'm going to catch that and just soften. Now, if I drag it, I'm going to really be extending that color. If I got the color right where I want it to be, I just want to catch that edge. I don't want to be dragging it into the rest of the hat. Okay, same thing on the other side. Lay the color in nice and solid. And flip the brush over. Now remember, I told you it's easier to blend pointing the brush towards the edge, so I need to flip this around in order to catch that edge a little bit better. Just barely catch that little edge, softening it. Okay, and I think I'll just leave that alone. I do want to get a little more highlight in the center of this hat, and it may or may not show very much, but I'm going to try it anyway, right in the center of the brim area. So I rinsed my brush, re-put extender in, but really wipe that all off on the round brush. There again, I want to make sure that my blender is clean. So rub it to make sure no other color comes off. And let's try just with the Hansa Yellow Medium. Let's see if that shows up. If it doesn't, you can put a little touch of white in there. But I want this center area to be just a little bit brighter. I don't want it to be white though. A little brighter than the original color. So there again, lay it in solid. Take your brush and just soften the edge. So it's going to go from orange to Indian yellow to Hansa Yellow Medium. Okay, I'll leave that alone. Just enough to make a difference. Okay, now let's turn this back around again. Let's finish the nose. I'm going to get just a little bit of burnt sienna out. Okay, and I'm still using up some of my bottled Traditions. It now comes in tubes. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of extender into the burnt sienna so it's more transparent. Maybe blot it on your towel just to make sure you don't have it too wet. Okay, and I just want to deepen the very outer edge where I shaded the first time. I don't want to come in as far. There, you can see that better. And then just barely catch where you stopped. Just want to get that outer edge a little bit darker. Okay, and then in the center top of the nose, I want it to be a little brighter, so I'm going to use white. Rinse your brush. Make sure the blender is clean. I'm going to get just a little bit, and you may want to switch to your smaller Dirty Dancer. I'm just going to see if I can do it with the big one here. I want a nice bright white dot, good size, and then just soften that for the highlight. Just barely touch, just soften the edges so that you have a nice little shine, bright nose there. Okay. Okay, then the rest of the hat is just adding in some black stripes and a little bit of an outline. I'm going to go ahead and use my smaller Dirty Dancer, the pointed round, for that. Get out some black. And I'm not going to be blending this at all, so this, if I needed to thin it, I would just use water. But usually I can use it straight from the bottle. Now, maybe you needed to, retrace your lines back on. If that's the case, you need to really dry it good first before you do that. But otherwise, I think if you really look carefully, you'll be able to see that it's probably just as easy to go ahead and give it a shot. Just wing it. So when I push my brush down a little bit, that's about the right width of the line that I want to have. And I'm starting right across the top of the brim. I know that I want another one close to this tail, but not touching it, so I'm going to do that one next. And come across, give it a little bit of a curve, don't make it too straight. A little bit of a curve down on each side. And just kind of taper that into the edges. And if you need to switch to a liner brush to clean that up, you sure could. Okay, then I want one right in the middle. So I'll come right across the middle here, kind of get myself going first, then I'll make it thicker. And it's your hat. It can be whatever, however many stripes you want, however wide or skinny you want them. Taper that into the edges. Okay, then for up in the tail of the hat, here where I've got it where it's flipped, I want to make that thin to thick so that it's going to kind of look like it's going under the flip of the hat there. Okay. And then I'm going to turn this so I get a little better angle for pulling. Okay, now I'm going to go skinny to fat. And I went outside the edge just a hair, so I take my brush that just clean water and I'm just going to get that right now before it dries. Otherwise I could come back and paint that in, you know, with my background color. But it'll wipe off right now if you do it with water. And then just keep going down the tail of the hat, kind of skinny to fat. There again, however many it takes is fine. Okay. And you certainly can switch to your liner brush too if that is easier. So let me just show you with that too. So if you're using your liner brush, water, almost went into the extender. Okay, water, okay, and then there again, sometimes I have to do it a couple strokes then, but I can lay it down, put pressure on, lay it down, get that to fill in. And I'm just going to keep kind of going around skinny to a little bit fatter. And I do want the little tail here to be black. So I'm going to go ahead and go to that next, just so I don't forget. And see how I've kind of gone from one side of the curve, and then I go and tuck it in skinny on the opposite direction there. So now I just need one more. Actually, this one might need two more stripes to make it look right. Yeah, I'll do one more on this one. Okay, and then also want to outline under the hat itself. That'll help separate it from the nose. So I'm just there again, just using water in the black. Use the script brush. Pull all the way across. And there we have the hat and the beard done. Now I am ready to do the pumpkins and the shoes on the gnome. On the pumpkins, I base coated or undercoated them first with a medium white, and then I coated them on top with the bright orange. Now I do want to kind of remember where my sections are, so I can either once it's dry, go ahead and transfer them back on or just kind of sketch in. What I do is I start with this first section in the front and kind of make like this long oval. And then on each side of that, I continue to make my sections with these curves to create the ridges in the pumpkin. Same with on the little one. I don't want to get my graphite lines or pencil lines too dark, so if they are, take an eraser and soften them up a bit after you put them on. Just get those in so that I remember where I want to be able to shade and highlight. Now if you get a different number of ridges than I had, not a big deal, just go with it. Every pumpkin is different. Okay. Then I want to start actually with some highlights. Now, in the pattern packet, there again, you do get, you know, your step-by-step. So the first step is going to be to get both some shadow going in with the Paragon orange, as well as highlights in the center of the ridges with the Indian yellow. So let's start with that. I'm going to use my Dirty Dancer again. I think I'm going to try this time not pre-wetting it and just use the extender in my brush itself. I'll start with the small Dirty Dancer, but I may want to switch to the bigger one, just depending on if I feel I need a bigger stroke. So wetting both ends. And I see I've got a little bit of color still in this blender, so I'm gonna dip it a few times and go in a circle, make sure I get all the extra color out of there so it's nice and clean. Really wipe that out of both. Let's start with I'm going to start with the centers, I think. And so Indian yellow, and it's kind of an orangey yellow color. Okay, and I'm going to put just a little dab of extender in there. Not too much, just enough to loosen it so that I'll have extra time for blending. Okay, so now in each of the center areas, I'm going to lay in a nice amount of color. And this is a really easy color to blend. So it's not going to be real difficult. It's pretty transparent. So this stage will go kind of quick. Let's see if I can tip it, get rid of some of the shine, so you can see where I'm going with this. And some areas you may not even really need to blend too much because it just does kind of melt in right in with the background color. So it's not a huge difference at this stage. Wipe off excess on my towel. Constantly cleaning. And I'm not trying to fill it in all the way. I want it in the center of each of those sections, but a nice amount, not too skinny. And even in the top sections here, don't forget about those. Dab in those as well. This is not a critical part because it's going to melt in. It's pretty transparent. And I'll go ahead and do the same thing on this front pumpkin. Let's get the yellowy orange in there. You may even be able to just soften it quickly with the round brush because it's going to pretty much melt in. I'm not going all the way to the bottom of the pumpkin. I'm staying on the top, let's say 2/3. Brush that in, get a little bit in each of the top sections. And we'll be doing brighter colors on here. And then just check to make sure you don't have any big, solid area that didn't blend in very well. So just catch that quick. All right, then I'm going to go ahead, rinse my brush in water, but redress it with the extender again. And this time I'm going to go with the Paragon Orange and add a little dab of extender in there so that I'll be able to blend it. And I want to create the ridges a little bit better now. So let's go along the line. It's like I'm outlining that ridge, but I want a little more across the bottom, and I want it kind of rounded. So let's go ahead and go all the way down, right on down, a little more on the bottom but rounded. Flip the brush and catch that edge. I'm not coming in real far with this color. Soften that. And I'm going to do that to each of the sections. So on the right side of this center ridge, I do it to the right of the line, and on the other side, I do it the opposite. So come along graphite, and this one pumpkin goes right off the edge of the project, so you'll have not quite such a lot to do there. In fact, the bottom is almost just kind of filled in there. But catch, soft, soft touch. I know sometimes when I do this quickly, it looks like I'm pushing down harder than I am, but I really just have a very, very light feathery touch when I do this. Okay, catch that next little outline and soften it just so that it doesn't look outlined anymore. And the other side of the pumpkin, I'll do the opposite side. Come on down, and I'm going to turn this because I want to be able to blend this a little bit easier. Point my brush towards the edge I want to blend. I'm also going to I'll put a little bit more extender in that Paragon Orange. I'm also going to get just the bottom of this very front one and kind of go up against my other pumpkin there too, and soften that. Drag it up just a little bit. Wipe off the excess. Now I know it's a little hard to see sometimes with the shine of the camera, so I'll try and tip this so you can see how dark I'm getting it. And if it dries on you, put a little bit more extender on your blender brush, but wipe it off, and you can use it to just kind of reactivate and blend your color a little bit more. Just continue on all the pumpkins, and there I kind of went through the stem of the other one, so I'm just going to kind of rub that out. Okay, and go ahead and blend that. Just a light touch. And the ridges up on top as well. And soften those as well. And you can always go back and put more highlight in. So if you overdo it anywhere, so don't be afraid to go back and do some more highlights in the other areas. Okay, let's also go ahead and do the pumpkin in the front. Same thing. Let's just come down the edges. Now eventually we want a little bit darker on the back pumpkin. But we'll get a little bit of this Piernon orange on the front one as well. Clean that brush just a little bit and rub it off. Just really soften, wipe off the excess. Just kind of dividing all of the ridges within the pumpkin. And each step defines it a little bit more. And I'll probably try to get a little bit more highlight on the front pumpkin as opposed to the back one, so that it's a little different than the one in the back. Just continuing on down. Now, if you feel like you're too dry, you certainly could have pre-moistened this. Another thing I want to mention too, depending on the surface that you're working on, sometimes I use more extender than others depending on the surface. So if I'm working on a canvas, a lot of times I have a tendency to use just a little bit more extender because I've got those crevices that I've got to be blending in. On the piece that I'm working on now, I don't need quite as much extender on this. Okay, I'm just going to kind of rub a little on the bottom, but I really don't want much on that bottom center front. Okay, I want a little bit more of a difference between the front and the back pumpkin here, so let's go ahead and add a little bit more orange on that back pumpkin, just to make sure. I'm going to have a little bit more difference in color, a little more variation, and soften. All right, I'll go ahead and wash my brush, and then I'm going to go to a lighter color. I'm going to go ahead and mix this time. If I were to just use the medium, the Hansa Yellow Medium all by itself, it's too transparent and it's not going to show up. So I'm going to take that and mix a little bit of white into it for a little more of a light yellow color. I'll have a little bit more highlight showing up that way. Add some extender in there. Okay, and I want to make sure that there again, that my blender brush is clean, so put it in extender and then just really rub that into the paper towel. Okay, now the first highlight I came down quite a ways, like 2/3 of the way. This time I want to stay closer to the top and right in the very center, so I don't want to come down as far. And then just soften where I stopped. Just to soften those edges. Now I could have done this in a little bit more of a dry brush as well. That's another technique that could be used. But I really like this extender blending method. So all these top third areas, and just softly catch the outer edge, wiping off the excess color as you go. You wipe off too much of the color on the pumpkin, go ahead, put some more on. And you can always do a second coat too, so if you decided that your first coat wasn't solid enough, you can certainly do another one. barely catch those edges. I just love this technique. It just reminds me a little bit more of working with oils, but yet it dries faster so that I can go on to the next step. I can add more colors faster. And I don't have the odor either. Catch the top edges of those back ones so that they stand out a little bit better. It doesn't take much. Separate the ridges from each other. Just barely catch that edge of color. Wipe off the excess and just soften. So really this, I mean, once you get the hang of this technique, it really is. I think this is a lot faster than trying to float color in the middle of an area. Because I can put the color on as solid as I want it. And then just soften. And if I mess into my, shadow areas and I need to go back and touch them up, I sure can. Okay, so there I've got my second layer of highlight. Now you can see the first layer really kind of disappeared. You don't see a whole lot of it anymore. It all just kind of melts together nicely. Okay, now my brush is getting dry, so I'm going to re-put extender on it. Wipe the excess off. And that reactivates, even if it's drying on you. It'll reactivate the color. But soft, soft touch, very soft. Put just a dab more extender into my yellow here too, just to be sure, because my brush is getting a little bit dry. I do have a fan that's blowing here in the studio, so it might be drying it a little more than normal. Just catch that edge. Wiping off the excess as I go. And so you can see how that's starting to really make those ridges look a little bit more dimensional, really popping them. And I don't want to go down too far with this color. Stay shorter. You need to touch up your shadows, you sure can. I love the pumpkin colors. I love the colors of the fall, and that's not normally what I decorate my house with, so I really love those colors, and I love using them in the fall and Halloween designs because they're colors I don't normally use on a daily basis, but I sure love the colors. They're so bright and bold, happy. Just little dabs, just trying to make each section a little bit rounder at the top. And I'm not going to want it quite as bright on the back ones, so I'm going to blend those away just a little bit more. I still want to put it on them. Let's catch those top edges. But I'm going to kind of blend a little bit more. Just kind of tap them a little bit more so that it mutes it. There. Okay, maybe just a touch more on this one right there. It was looking a little flat. Kind of dab that in. All right, then I have go a little lighter and a little darker yet to finish those off. Rinse my brush. Redress it with extender again. Okay, and I'm going to go, I think I'll go to the burnt sienna. And let's put a little bit of extender in that. A little bit more of a wash. Okay, and I want to catch the very deepest areas. I don't want to go all the way up the pumpkin this time. I want to catch those very darkest shadow areas. I might as well go ahead and do both of those ridges at the same time. And catch that inside edge and soften. We'll come down. Get some on the other side. Just barely catch that edge. Back, let's tip it, get a little bit better angle here. Get that a little bit darker, but where it touches the front pumpkin so that they stand out from each other a little better. Tuck that in next to the stem. And to be honest, I actually like doing the stem last. So I usually do the pumpkins and then go ahead and paint the stem in. But for demonstration purposes, I just wanted to show you where it's at. But I would have typically not even put it in until the very end. That way it's not in my way. And I want to get some on those top sections as well. So right in the deepest crevices here, right next to where the stems are. Try not to lose all your pretty orange when you're working on these shadows. It's easy to do. It's just really tucking in little corners. Maybe a little under the stem too. Almost like an outline and then softening, especially on the top areas there. Let's see, I want a little bit more on this bottom one. Until it dries, sometimes it's hard to tell if you've got enough or not, so you can always go back and do another layer. There we go. Okay. I'll put a little bit on the front pumpkin, but I want to do less on the front pumpkin. I don't want to go up as high. I want to stay more in just the very corners, just to give a little bit of dimension in those bottom sections, but not very high, but it needs just a little more depth. Just tucking in the burnt sienna, softening. Tucking in these top little crevices also near the stem. There again, just almost more like an outline. and then just barely tap or soften. This is pretty wet, and it's a transparent color right now that I'm using. I don't want to use a thick amount of paint, but just really getting it in all those little crevices. Just enough to create a little bit different color. A little more up on top here. Kind of go around, barely around the stem area, so it'll stand out a little better. And if I decided I needed more variation, I'd probably go back to the orange on that front one rather than doing more of the burnt sienna. I think I put my hand in this back section, so I'm going to add just a little bit more in there. Okay, rinse brush good. More extender. Clean the other side. Really rub it on the paper towel. And now I want to get a brighter white going in here. Now you can either go to white or even paler yellow. So just depending if you're afraid, I'm going to go ahead and try the white. Then I'm going to add extender in there. A little bit transparent. Really make sure that your blender brush is clean. Okay, now this time it really stays almost more like a little circle that you're going to soften in the top of all those little curved sections. Just barely catch a little bit of a shine right in the middle of your yellow highlight there. Kind of pop those forward. And you get too carried away, you could soften it with a little yellow too. But I think these are working out okay. You blend too much away, put more on. I just want to catch the top curved areas of those rinds. I kind of softened that one a little too much. Let's put a little more back on. And some more on here. Yeah, so don't be afraid to go back a step if you have to. Just kind of keep playing with it. I do want some little touch of the white on these top areas as well, because that's going to help them stand out from the pumpkin in the back. And just, it's almost like a little outline, and just dab it to soften it. Gonna brighten this one in the front here a little more. Okay, I do want some on the back ones here too, but I think what I'm going to do for that one is I'm going to just make that this time make it a little bit more of barely a yellowy white. Re-clean my blender brush and rub it on the paper towel. Pat the excess off. So there again, right in the top sections there, just barely catch that edge. Try not to pat too hard. That helps that to really pop forward. And I'm trying not to get in the middle. Unless I got, you know, too much paint, then I could dab in the middle a little bit to soften it, but I try to just really catch those edges. And just lay that color in. Flip your brush over and soften. Sometimes I pull a soft stroke, sometimes I'm doing a light little dab. You're going to find that you just need to play a little bit to see which direction works best for you, which one of those techniques. Just wiping the excess off on my towel in between. Because if you don't wipe the extra off, you're just going to keep pushing color around and you're never going to be able to soften it. So you want to be able to get rid of that extra. And I did put some on these top sections too, just there again, kind of like a little outline, and just soften them. And you can always come back with your background color and clean up the edges, you know, if you went outside of them. And one more here. Get that patted in. All right, let's take a look at my front one here one more time. See if I want any more. I want maybe just a little bit brighter on this one side. Yeah, just a little bit more in there. Kind of push it around. Okay, I think I'll leave them alone. And then there is the stem. And the stem, there again, I base coated it in with the medium white. Then I used some of the yellow deep to fill it in. And yellow deep is a transparent color. I just did the one coat, so it is streaky. Because I wanted the rind to kind of have texture. So then I'm going to make kind of a greenish color. I'm going to take a little bit of this medium green, and let's see, what did I add in there? I just wanted it dirty. Maybe a little either burnt sienna or black. Let's make it a little bit darker green. Add a little extender in there. I just want kind of a dirty green. All right, and I want to create some ridges. So I'm going to come down and make like these stripes. Add some stripey brush strokes and then just soften them. Let's see if that tip it so it shows up a little better. And just catch them a little bit. I'm not trying to blend them real much. Just maybe even just kind of dab that in. So just creating some kind of green stripes. I want to have it kind of like it's coarse. It's not smooth. Okay, then I'll rinse my brush, re-put extender in, and I'm going to catch a little bit of white, but I'll let it be kind of a dirty white eventually. So now I want to catch like the edges of the rounded sections. And just there again, just kind of blend those in, pop some forward. I'm going to do inside the top part where the stem has been cut, add a little bit in there. You know, may or may not need to add, you know, some in up higher. Maybe just a couple little streaks and soften. Same with the front one. Get a little bit in the rind where it was cut. And if you feel you need to outline it a little bit, you can, but if you outline it, soften the outline with your blender brush so it doesn't look outlined, if that makes sense. I'll get those curved edges again. Just kind of blot them. Break up that stem just a little bit. And then you pretty much have the pumpkin. So if you do need to outline, make sure that you soften it with your blender brush. So that is it for the pumpkin. Now we just have the shoes. Okay, for the shoes, I was trying to make them look a little bit like the LL Bean boots. And to start with, there again, I undercoated it all with medium white so that it would show up better on this plaid background. Otherwise, it's pretty hard colors to cover. So the top part of the boot is burnt sienna. The middle area is the Laguna, and then for the bottom, where the soles and the heels are, that is marigold. So I'm going to just use the liner or script brush and use some marigold. So when I put the soles in, I want the paint a little thicker. I'm not thinning it. I want to see the brush ridges. And it kind of gives the illusion that you've also got some shading going on there. So I'm pulling little strokes to fill those in. And the front part is almost like thick little dots. There again, I don't want it nice and smooth, so I want it kind of thick paint that I'm using. It just kind of makes it look a little bit more dimensional. So I'm making like thick dots going across. This is the marigold. The marigold is an Americana color. Okay, and then also the straps that go across the boot are also the marigold. So let's just create a strap that goes across, and like the impression that there's a little buckle on that outside edge. And depending on how you did your beard, parts of it are going to be underneath, so if it changes a little bit from the design or the pattern, don't worry about it too much. And you can always go back and touch up a few of your little tips of your beard if you needed to. Okay, then I also have a line above the heel, and that comes in and attaches to the front edge of your boot as well. Okay, I've got the Laguna is this middle part, but then I make a lighter color for the stripes. So I'm going to use the Laguna and some white, make it a lighter color. And go ahead and outline the top edge of that section. Make it a little more of a ridge. and then there's ridges in the boots. So I'm going to, the first one, I don't want to start on that top edge. I want to come in a little ways, and then I'm going to pull forward and down and around. Then I can add a couple more. So come forward and curve it where the toe is going to be. And I don't want it too skinny because I want to be able to kind of do some shading and highlighting after. I know it's a small boot, but it's just kind of fun to do something different. Okay, the same on this other one. I'm not going to start on the top edge. I come in, come forward, and then curve where the toe is. Add a couple more. Okay, clean the brush. And if you needed to thin it, just use water at this stage. Okay, then for inside of the burnt sienna area, I added just some little white stitch lines, just thinning the titanium white with some water and using the little script brush, and I just did little slashes, little teeny tiny little marks, and I did a couple rows because they have double stitching. Same on the other side. Just little teeny little slash lines above your blue. Each of my gnomes, I like to add a little something different for the feet. It's just kind of a fun little twist to the piece. Okay, then in the bottom of the heels and the soles, I've got some white also. And I've got, so the bottom of the boots, I'm going to make kind of curves. So outlining it. But to make it look textured, then I just added in each of those curves, I added little strokes. Not blending them, just little curved so that it looks like there's texture in there. Added a little line between the marigold line above the heel. Outline the heel. There again, using little curves. But the heel, I didn't put those texture lines in. I just left those as is. So outline between the heel. And then the front part, outline it underneath. Add the little curved lines just to break it up. Okay, then I've got in the blue sections, I've got little washes of this white, and you probably won't even have to blend them. So right in the middle of the blue, come away from that front edge. It's more in the toe area. I'm just adding brighter white stripes inside the blue for a highlight. And you may not even need to blend that. Also, the lighter blue here, I'm just catching that front curve. Okay, same on the other side. Let's catch just inside that front curve. It's right in the middle of the blue. And then right in the middle of the blue where the toes are. And I did some also in the yellow. There again, you can probably just do little lines. Now if it doesn't look blended enough for you, you certainly could use your blender brush and soften those. But I'm just pulling little strokes. I'm going to go ahead and I think maybe put just a little dab. I don't think I did it on the original, but I'm going to put a little dab of white in the middle of the buckle too. One side you're not going to be able to tell because of the beard. Okay, then I've got the buckles are outlined with burnt sienna. So thin that with a little bit of water. And if you need to outline the straps, if they're not showing up, that's also the burnt sienna. But I want to outline where the buckle and the straps overlap. See if you need to outline the outer edge of the buckle. Burnt sienna. And it's not going to show a whole lot. I'm also going to outline above the sole of the boot with the burnt sienna, little wash. There again, I want the texture, so don't make it just a flat straight line. Get the little bumps in there. Okay, let's see. Then I've got all that's left is just my little bit of shadow in the blue areas. So I want a little bit darker shade of the Laguna. I'm going to put the tiniest touch of black in there. Now be careful. That black is really going to take over. So do it just a little at a time. Little dab of extender in there because I am going to blend that. Get a little, make sure that my blender brush is clean, so I've just put that in extender and wipe it off. Okay, I want a little shadow underneath that lighter blue stripe and next to the ridge. Let's see if I tip this so you can see the color better and soften. So it's kind of like a thick outline and then you're softening it. And you'll do that next to each of those ridges. Outline it and then just soften it. Outline and soften. Just barely catch that and soften it. Let's do a little on the back of the heel too. Put some in back there and soften. So really pretty simple for the boots. It's just little putsy areas, just, you know, back of the heel, under the blue. Just soften. And then next to each of those ridges that come forward, and you're just outlining and softening. And you can always add more if you need to. Go back if you need to and refresh yourself with the very first chapter of this. Okay, that shows all the other elements next to it. But all of my brushes and pattern packets are available on my website, www.jillybean.net. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel and give me a like if you enjoyed watching this video. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.